Hi, in this lecture we are going to revisit super to see if you really understood in the previous lectures. So we will revisit super, we will also review method lookup and message lookup, and we are going to see really briefly what are class methods. So let's start with a little puzzle. So we have the die class. It's a class method that is redefining new. And this method is calling super new, getting some instance here, and then calling the initialize method. So sending the message initialize on the instance. Now, we execute the die new expression. Some questions. So, what is inst in here? What is super? And what is super new? Take a couple of minutes, try to understand this scenario and try to write down the answers to these questions. We are going to visit them in a couple of seconds. Put pause to the video. So some hints. Super is not the super class. Remember that before when we saw super was never the super class of the object, or it was never the super class of anything. It's neither the instance of a superclass or the instance of the superclass of whatever. So also, remember that super is the message receiver. So that means that somehow super and self are the same object. They reference the same object. Remember also that the message that we are sending, we are activating, is die new. So think about that. What is the selector that we're sending? What is the message? And what is the receiver of this message? So in this case, the receiver is the class die. So we are not sending the message to a normal object, a common object. We are sending a message to a class, which is a special object in the language. Remember how method lookup works. So if we have an object, in this case, a color rectangle, and we send a message, like in this case, area, first, what we're going to do is the lookup. So step number one. Here, if we take the receiver, which is a color rectangle, and take its class, which is the color rectangle class, we are going to start the lookup from there. So starting from the class, we are going to go up in the hierarchy, looking for the method that corresponds with the expected selector. So here we are looking for area. So color rectangle doesn't define area, but rectangle does. So it doesn't find it in color rectangle subclass. It will go up and find it in the rectangle class. It will take that method, and then the second step of the message send is to execute that method on the receiver. So we are going to take area and execute with multiplied by height on the color rectangle, our instance that is down here. So in here, what happens again is that we're going to take this message, and really it's a two-step. So the method lookup is first taking the class and then going up. So it's super important to understand that it's first taking the class, then going up the hierarchy looking for the method, and then the final step of the message send, after the lookup is done in these two steps, is executing the method on the instance. So the solution of the previous puzzle is that here, super is of course the same object as self. So if self was the die class, the class die, super is also the die class. So super and self are the same, and super is also the receiver. What does super new do? So super new will do a message send to super, which in this case is a die class, but it will change the method lookup. If you remember, when we used super, what happened was that the method lookup was changed and the lookup started from a different place. In this case, actually every time, it will start from the super class of the class where the current method is defined. So here in this case, this method is defined in die class. So the method lookup, it will start from the super class. It doesn't matter which one it is. So it will always restart the lookup from the super class of the current class. So it doesn't matter if the object is an instance of any other class, any other subclass, it will always start from the direct superclass of die class. Now, once we find that method super new, the new that is probably up in the hierarchy, we are going to apply it to the current instance. So that means that we are going to apply it to the current die class. So die. Executing new on a class will return us a new instance of that class. So once we have the die class, we are going to instantiate it, and that will create a die instance. That means that our instance variable is going to point to a die object, which is the one that will receive the message initialize. So we're going to send the message initialize to this guy, the die object, and then we're returning that instance. With the drawing, what we see is that actually what happens here is that we have a double hierarchy. This happens in reflective languages such as Pharo, Python, or Ruby, where we have our classes, dice, object, and since classes are also objects, they also have their own classes. So here the dice class has its own class, which is the dice meta class, called like dice class here. And the same happens with object class. So every time that I'm going to send a message to a dice object, the lookup will look for the class, which will be this one, and then go up in the hierarchy. In our case here, since we're sending the message to the dice class, we are going to look for its class and then go up its hierarchy. It's just the same mechanism as before. The only thing is that we are thinking about classes and the classes of classes instead of just the classes of normal objects. In summary, sending a message, again, is always looking up the correct method and then applying it to the receiver. That never changes. Now, when we use super instead of any other message send, what happens is that the method lookup will start in a different place. It will start from the super class of the class where the current method or the current expression is declared. You should also remember that super and self are the same object. Both represent the receiver of the current message. And the only thing that changes is the method lookup, where it starts. Before leaving you, I leave you with this challenge, so take a couple of minutes and challenge yourself. So imagine that you have this, you have a method a foo in the class A, and you do super class equals self class. Remember that class is just a message that eventually will return the class of the receiver, and equals is the identity. So it will compare if the two compared objects are the same object, not if they're equals, but they are actually the same object. So what does this return, true or false? I leave you with that.